So if you remember that, then it becomes clear what's going to be done. And I'll make another astonishing prediction, but I think it's even more plausible in the next 3 or 4 years. Already in this country, there's starting to be a consensus emerging about our tax code. Just remember about our tax code. Put it in perspective. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address was all of 273 words, defined the character of the American nation. Constitution, a little over 1,300, the Declaration of Independence, a little over 1,300 words. Constitution, all the amendments, a little over 7,200 words. The Bible, which took centuries to put together, 773,000 words. And the Federal Income Tax Code, and all the attendant rules and regulations, not just the code itself, but all the interpretations that go with it, about 9 million words and rising. Nobody knows what's in it. The IRS doesn't know. You call their hotline, fourth of the time they give you the wrong answer. You don't have to go to the Amazon to find exotic creatures. They're crawling around in the code. But you know what's happening, though? Even the political class is beginning to get it, even if the White House hasn't. You saw it on that Simpson-Bowles commission that they appointed. The president did 3 years ago, ignored their recommendations, which is always what happens to commissions. But Democrats and Republicans agreed to the idea that if you simplify the code, you could lower tax rates across the board. Democrats signed on to the idea, some of them, lowering the top rate, income tax rate, to as low as 23%, between 23 and 28%. And so what I think you're going to see play out once we get really serious about it, which we will, if this president doesn't do it, the next one will, what happened in 1986. In 1986, the tax code was filled with tax shelters, which Democrats, even though they voted for them, said they didn't like. Republicans wanted to reduce tax rates. And what they discovered was, if you're going to touch one tax shelter, you better do all of them. It's like being half pregnant. You can't do any surgery here. You do it either all or nothing. And what they're going to find with the tax code, if you try to do a few preferences, as they call them, not going to work. You're going to have to do every single one. So I think you're going to see a dynamic eventually develop is truly where they bring in something like the flat tax. Just junk the whole thing and start all over again. I've got a proposal, generous exemption for adults and for children, and that's it. Family of 4, no federal income tax on your first $46,000 of income. Only 17% above that, no tax on savings, and no death taxes. You should be allowed to leave the world unmolested by the IRS. Or as our founders would say, no taxation without respiration. And on the business side, do the same thing. Cut it from 35 to 17. Get rid of depreciation schedules for tax purposes. You make a capital investment, write it off in the year in which you make it. If you have a loss, you carry it forward till you use it up. You do that with a stable dollar, and you'll see this economy start to take off like the proverbial rocket. We spent 6.5 billion hours, according to the IRS, last year filling out tax forms. Imagine if all that time was yours again. Even if you did nothing, it would be good for the family pet and to be around. And so I think it's going to come to pass, astonishing as it seems today, because again, the whole dynamic. And for people who get hung up, well, I lose this deduction or that deduction, do a variation of what Hong Kong does, and that is give people a choice. You can go with the new system, or if you lack self-esteem, you can go with the old system. And see for yourself which one is better. And I think 99% will say simplicity is better. You do a few keystrokes online or sheet of paper if you still like paper. Whatever. Simple. 2 other quick headwinds. One is spending. Spending, once you realize that resources come from you, money does not come from Mars. It comes from you through borrowing, through taxing, through printing of money, which is another form of taxation. So if you have binge spending, that's not stimulus. That means taking resources that you've created, putting them through a political sausage factory, and then spraying them out to favored constituencies after government takes a cut. Japan's been doing this for 20 years. Look what it's done. We tried it in the 30s. Does not work. Letting people keep more resources means more resources will be created. And a final one, of course, is regulation. Most of you know regulation can be a form of taxation. We do need those rules of the road, like Madison said, in terms about being angels. We do need laws. But what we've done to us today, federal government now calculates regulations cost this economy $1.75 trillion a year. Bigger than every economy in the world except for a handful. We did it to ourselves. And you can see already the perversity impact on what we call Obamacare. Imagine, normally in this country, if you grow, we say hooray. But now, if you start to reach 50 people, you have to make a decision. Do you try to create a new entity? Do you block your growth because suddenly your expenses are going to go up? Part-time work. Oh, make sure nobody works close to 30 hours. Make sure it's 27. The record keeping, even if you don't have 50 people, the record keeping you're going to have to do to show that people work less than 30 hours, make sure that you don't have equivalent of 50 full-time employees, all that kind of junk. Another huge layer on small businesses. And this is just the beginning. And you look what Dodd-Frank is doing to community banks, which were not the problem. Amazing thing about Dodd-Frank, if it was around 10 years ago, we still would have had the financial crisis because the Fed still would have done what it did. We still would have had the housing bubble. So when you look at regulation, it becomes clear. Self-inflicted wounds. Let me just close on health care, which is it's going to be a huge part of the debate as Obamacare, Affordable Health Care Act kicks in. Ask yourselves, in closing, why in the world do we have a health care crisis? And the quick answer is people like me are getting older, therefore we want more health care services, prices keep going up, and so the whole system becomes unaffordable. But ask yourself, why is demand for health care seen as a crisis, whereas the demand for everything else in this economy is seen as an opportunity? People want more cars. Detroit and other manufacturers will be glad to help you out. You want more apps. A lot of writers glad to help you out. Great business education. Certain school. Is it Simon? We'll be glad to help you out. So what's with health care? Why is demand seen as a disaster instead of a great opportunity? The answer is because we don't have real free markets in health care. We have portions of it, which is why we still produce more pharmaceuticals, more devices, so that tax will kill us, than the rest of the world. But we have a disconnect between providers and consumers. You know who the real customer is in healthcare? Third parties. They're the real customers in healthcare, whether it's government, insurers, employers. They're the real customers, not the patient. So you have a crazy system. Because we grew up with it, we don't realize how weird it is. Imagine, if you go to a doctor, hospital, or clinic and you ask in advance what it costs, you get a very strange look. It means one of two things. Either you're uninsured or you're a lunatic. I mean, why would you want to know what it costs? What's it to you? Now, can you imagine going for dinner, ordering a nice bottle of wine, say, I don't care what it costs, let Medicare Blue Shield sort the thing out. So the system goes haywire. So that begs the question, why in the world can't we in health care? We do what we do with food. Food's more basic than health care. No food, no nothing. And so if people have a problem getting food, we don't have the government take over agriculture. If government took over agriculture, we'd have no more obesity. We'd all be starving. Think of it. They tried in Russia and China. Hideous results. And so even though government is involved somewhat in agriculture, you have agriculture produce the food, private companies process the food, truckers and railroads and airplanes deliver the food, and everything from hotels to restaurants, grocery stores, supermarkets sell the food. People have problems. You have everything from food banks to food stamps to deal with it. Why in the world can't we do the same thing in healthcare? Open it up to real free enterprise. Let entrepreneurs figure out how to produce more for less. You see little signs of it. Flu shots. Once upon a time, you'd make an appointment at the doctor's office. Now you go to the drugstore. Airports, $25, $35, done. More and more, if regulations would allow it, you'd have more and more of these small entities in the store, like a Walmart's, nurse practitioner. You come in for routine stuff. The nurse knows if there's a problem, they'll send you to the emergency room, so you don't go in when you cut your finger to the emergency room. Determine the severity of the thing. They can treat it there, fine, low cost, off you go. Or about LASIK surgery for the eyes. Why does that cost less today in real terms than it did 10 years ago? and better today than it was 10 years ago because there's not that disconnect between providers and consumers. So providers have every incentive to make it more affordable to you, more attractive to you. Same thing with cosmetic surgery. None of you need it, pander. But in the last 15 years, cosmetic surgery has grown sixfold. Sixfold. Huge technological advances, but not the inflation. Why? Because unless it's a result of disease or accident, there's not that disconnect. So if you want a procedure done, what do? You scope it out like anything else. You have friends who can keep their mouths shut. You might ask them for advice. And the system works. Why can't we do that more in healthcare and have real safety nets? So bottom line, we have some pretty severe headwinds, which is why we're going to do better this year, but not as well as we could, whether it's monetary, tax, spending, regulatory, but those things can change. And the nice thing about the American system is if something doesn't work, we demand a change. And eventually we get it right, and we'll do it again. Thank you very much.
Cut the trumpets. We want to thank Steve for being such a passionate advocate of individuals and their dreams being the wellspring of economic prosperity. And indeed, when you think of the word capital, its Latin origin refers to the head. We frequently think of capital as being bricks and mortar or financial instruments, but it's really the ideas that spring from the head that are the wellspring of prosperity. Steve would highly encourage you to read the book, Freedom Manifesto. It's not just about what happens in terms of economic well-being, but the morality of society through individuals pursuing their dreams. It's an idea that dates back to Adam Smith and the third book that he intended to write but never got around to. We have a book signing with Steve in the lobby. GEC members, you have a ticket, George Eastman Circle members. If you'd like to purchase a ticket, we also have those available. And if you'd like to join the George Eastman Circle, would highly encourage you. We have 396 now faculty, staff, alums, friends supporting Simon, 2,500 plus supporting the university. We even have this year 3 students supporting the institution even before they graduate, including one first-year student. All 3, I believe, are with us today. Gwen Green has said that it's great to see philanthropy become cool. There's a buffet lunch. We'll reconvene here at 12 o'clock for Lou Gerstner in the Executive of the Year Award. Thank you for being here.